When I was 12 years old, I was hit by a truck and in the back of the head with a mirror. And
Oh, wow.
I was in a traumatic head injury. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, near total amnesia from before that point.
Uh-huh.
And a weird thing about that particular type of amnesia is I had all of the information and none of the experiences. So
Wow.
I knew what a bus was and I knew what it was for, but I could not remember ever having seen or been on one.
Uh-huh.
And so it made it made it hard to function and live and interact with people. And uh, I think it was Moby Dick was the first book I ever found that was a fiction book. I was supposed to be in class, and I found that in the library, and I just sat there and read it. And it took them hours to find me. I was just sitting and reading Moby Dick because all of a sudden it came alive.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the only show on the internet that powers up from sober to buzzed to drunk to absolutely blotto. I am your host, Dwayne Marhensi, who's somewhere in between those levels at all time. And joining me today, I'm really honored and thrilled to have author, gamer, and all-around rad guy, Jason J. Willis with me. Jason, welcome to the bar.
Hi, I can't promise that alcohol will affect me at all, but I can promise I don't have any inhibitions anyway, so it's all right.
Very good. That's the best way to start it. So, thanks so much for being here. So, let me give you the Whiskey Notes version of an introduction. So, I know your work appears and there's the System Apocalypse anthology. And I think your first book was, and is it just the letters, judging from Amazon? Was it just WWMRD? Is that
That's the short
is that
story,
short? Okay.
and that is short for What Would Mr. Rogers Do?
Very good. Okay.
Yes, in a post-apocalyptic horrific hellscape where every other story that you'll see is, well, for the most part, there's one called Apocalypse Parenting, which is fantastic, which isn't,
Uh-huh.
but it's what, how would this computer programmer who becomes, in this is the case of the main System Apocalypse book, that becomes a kick-ass warrior ninja type with a mech suit, how would he handle things? Well,
Right.
when Dow Dao Wang is the co-author and the creator of the System Apocalypse universe. He was doing the anthology and he was looking for stories of totally different than what's normal in the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working on a short story about an insurance agent, because I used to be an insurance agent during the apocalypse with cool powers that, like, if somebody from the community died that was an adventurer, the community can get a refund on some of the experience and money and stuff that they lost
Uh-huh.
investing in him and stuff.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I watched, there was a thing on, I just saw a clip. I just happened to see a clip of Mr. Rogers in front of Congress. And it's
Mm-hmm.
one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. It was early on when they were first getting funding for PBS, but it wasn't that big, before it changed all the stuff that's happening now with, it was never, contentious, but it was brand new then.
Sure.
And they were trying to get like $1 million in funding or something like that. And before all these old cantankerous men in Congress, and they're all serious and somber. And he starts just talking to them and being him and the way
Uh-huh.
that he was. And he just talks to them and educates them. And by the end of it, they didn't even vote to approve the money. They just gave him a standing ovation and like cheered and got really happy. And they were just so enthusiastic. Again, they
Yeah.
didn't even bother to vote. The main guy said, okay, it looks like you got your money. They didn't even
Uh-huh.
do a vote. And
Very good.
and then I watched him he gave us, you know how the internet clicks onto the next thing. It went on to
Sure.
the next thing, which was an amazing thing where he's talking to, this was near the end of his career. He's talking to a bunch of students at his alma mater and talking to them about life and about, these things. And I just thought to myself, we need more of this and less of everything else.
That's a great way to say it. This is very true.
And so in my head, I was thinking about, this, still working on the story and stuff. So I threw out the story I was working on and I got, what would it be like if in that same universe, the System Apocalypse universe, where monsters have come to Earth and the world has been twisted by power and alien invasions and stuff into this horrific hellscape that works on video game logic, where the more you kill, the more powerful you become. How would
Uh-huh.
somebody with old school classic Mr. Rogers values deal with a world like that? And so I
Mm-hmm.
put a grade school teacher who was a big
Sure.
fan of Mr. Rogers and old school 80s geekdom and stuff. I put that character in that same universe.
Uh-huh. Very cool. I love that. And it's funny, I have the Steelers sign, or I said over here. So my family is all back Pittsburgh. Mr. Rogers is a treasure. There's a
Yeah,
statue out for him. I think he was born, but he lived his life. He filmed the show in Pittsburgh and things. So he
that's
was
cool.
yeah, yeah, he's a mythological, kind of figure out there. And I guess till his dying day, every fan, mail he received, he wrote back personally. No assistance. No, he wrote back every single person that ever wrote him a letter. So
That's why.
I think that's a really neat idea for a story. Cool. I'll have to see how to pick that up so I can see how it
Awesome.
plays out, because that's really fun. So thanks for that. Is there anything else as far as introductions go? Any other writing, anything else you want to mention while we're at it?
Um, I, I I've been a long time gamer, so I'll kind of introduce people to the gamelit lit RPG genre for those who don't understand it.
Uh-huh.
All my life, I played video games, role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, all of the different, well, most of the different role-playing games. There's been hundreds, but I've played dozens and dozens and dozens.
Uh-huh.
And I've just always loved games and the genre lit RPG. A lot of the adventure stuff, a lot of the classic elements of fantasy and science fiction got driven out of publishing as the editors and the publishers were longtime readers that were sick of everything that the fans love.
Yeah, I
And
I can feel you. Yeah.
and they ignore the fact that the readers are young in a lot of cases. And so they start getting rid of all of those things and getting rid of all the elements that especially younger male readers like. And
Mm-hmm.
so you lose like a generation or two of readers because of that.
Sure.
Um, and then because video games are so popular, because role-playing games are so popular, all of a sudden, I don't know who, some people started writing books. I think actually it was some Russian authors that were the earliest, started writing books that not only had, like there were like the old Dragonlance novels for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, but those were actual just fantasy novels. But these actually started incorporating game-like elements specifically built into the magic systems and the world.
Uh-huh.
So you've got spellcasters, you've got progression where you level up, you've got stats, you've got things like that. So you can always feel the sense of as your character is progressing. And it's developed and grown into spreading out into like anime style and like the Eastern cultivation style. And then you've got the video game versus tabletop role-playing games and stuff. But it got really, really popular. And that's great in that it is getting a lot of more people reading. Uh, but video games, role-playing games, they get very murder hobo-y, very like
Mm-hmm.
lots of adventure, lots of violence, lots of glorification of violence. Don't show the consequences of the violence, just the violence and the
Sure.
getting power from violence. And so they're really good in that they're teaching the value of self-defense and defending others and things like that. But it's also really glorification of violence and hyper-violence and stuff like that. So it was cool to be able to address that from a different viewpoint
Right.
uh, that maybe isn't quite as popular. So it would hurt the sales a little bit, but also it's different. So that'll help the sales, but
Uh-huh. Sure.
it's just more fun to explore different value sets. And I kind of came at it from both directions in my book. So
Right, right. No, that's awesome. What it made me think of was we were driving home. So yesterday was my son's birthday. As of us recording this, it'll show for everyone later. And we were coming back. We took him out to breakfast. We were coming back with him and our youngest daughter, who's 18 now, and my son's 14. And I was like, "Did you guys ever read any choose your own adventure books?"
I love those.
And yeah, and they were like, no, no, we didn't read those. Like they knew what they were, but they hadn't read them. And I was like, oh, I wonder if the kind of a change was like when I was growing up, Nintendo and stuff was around, right? But it was very early with video games and things still, right? You had Atari and Nintendo, and I think my parents used to have an old Apple, computer, and I
Yeah.
played one or two games that were on there. And I was like, oh, but that kind of did turn into video games, which is a more fun version of it,
Hmm.
because it's like you go and then you have to choose a path, here and there, depending on the games, right? They can go all kinds of different ways. But I'm like, oh, I can kind of see where that went. But I love your point about, video games. Sure, it's super fun to go. Like my son was playing Fortnite, some
Yeah.
years ago now, but right, it's just blasting people all the time. And that's fun in your video game world, but actually getting to what are the consequences of it and things, and touching those same readers and things with that. And also it's a bridge, right? I think what's failed us a lot, especially with male readers, is that bridge from reading when you're young, just
Yeah.
for the joy of it and the adventure, the old pulp novels and stuff that we used to have in abundance. That would lead, I think there used to be a term for it, like I forget the other writer, but it was something, like pulp to Hemingway
Yeah.
pipeline. That it was, you would start reading, they would be really into reading as they got
Maybe?
older. It might have been. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. Someone had mentioned to me once, but I'm like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. That like,
Yeah.
you get to them, and then yeah, as you get a little older, your taste might evolve a little bit, and you
Yeah.
want, I think having a good swath of what you read's important anyways, but getting that. So that's really cool. Thanks for the introduction on that. If you're watching Writers Drinking Whiskey, you believe in independent media and discovering artists and creators for yourself. And to that end, I will be releasing my latest novel, Pirates of Appalachia, as a weekly serial on Substack. What is Substack, you ask? Very good question. It's an app where you can sign up to support independent creators directly, from news to podcasts to YouTubers to a growing community of today's very best short story writers and novelists. What is Pirates of Appalachia? You must not have been paying attention the many years of this show. So for you in the back of the class napping, which was what I was generally doing as well. Pirates is an epic absurdist satire featuring a band of bootlegging buccaneers who take to the rivers to sack the grandest city-state in the world, Pittsburgh, and prevent its encroach upon the unincorporated lands of Appalachia. Pirates is satire with its buck-teeth bared and ferocious eye set upon everything and anyone. And thanks to your support, it's not neutered by corporate mandates or performative activism. I've been a writer for a long time. My short story anthology, Without Expiration, won an American Fiction Award and was named one of the best indie books of 2020 by Kirkus Reviews. And my Christmas satire, A Fire for Christmas, won 2 American Fiction Awards and an International Book Award. And Pirates is not only as good as those books, it is better. As every day when I sat down to write this, I was challenging myself to become a better storyteller, a better writer, a better person, and a better drinker, because it drove me to drink quite a bit. And now my alcohol tolerance is like 3 bottles of Jack, and it's expensive and probably bad for my liver. Pirates will be complete in its entirety on Substack. So if you go on there, subscribe to me, you'll get Pirates, you'll get a free ebook. And for anyone that wants to support the show for $5 a month, you'll also get a lot of behind the scenes stuff on Pirates. You'll get a free audiobook of Without Expiration I mentioned earlier, and you'll get early access to all of these Writers Drinking Whiskey episodes months and months early. And for every 100 subscribers, I'm going to host a Writers Drinking Whiskey happy hour directly for subscribers. So come on, we will chat, we will have a great time. So support independent storytellers and join the community. The link will be in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you're not inclined to check out Substack, not a problem at all. You can support the channel by becoming a member on the YouTube box, or just continue watching. We'll run you a tab. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. So what I like to start with, though, because we've missed the drinking portion here, which is perfectly okay, but maybe we can place you in the world. So if you could let us know where you are in the world and what's the best place to get a drink there.
I am in northern Minnesota, and the best place to get a drink is my office right here.
Very good.
I don't like paying a lot of money for things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
yeah, so this is the best place that I'm aware of. I'm not a big fan of Minnesota. Has a lot of beer, and they've got a lot of breweries, and people that love beer love a lot of the stuff that's made here. And I just can't stand beer. It's too bitter. I don't enjoy the flavor. On one hand, on my side of my family, it was all beer. On the other side of the family, it was all martinis, and I had no interest in either. So it was not until I was significantly older that I found out that I even liked any alcoholic drinks. It started with like Not Your Father's root beer and cinnamon whiskey, the
Uh-huh.
Fireball, which is
Sure.
fantastic. And then this, though, is I was going to make a concoction. I know you know this, but they don't. I was going to make a concoction of cream soda and some whiskey and a little bit of root beer bitters and stuff. I tried it. It just did not work. It was gross. But I did
Hmm.
find out that the Crown Royal vanilla is fantastic just by itself. And I did
Uh-huh.
find out if you add a little bit of butterscotch schnapps, the butter shots, just like a whisper of the butter shots, that does
Uh-huh.
add just a little extra something to it that I really do like. So this is
Right.
that with just a little bit of the butter shots and the nice little ice sphere in there
Uh-huh. Very good.
because it's hot in my office and I can't have my fan on or it will make too much noise. Uh, this is
Sure.
better without the ice.
Right. Sure. Yeah, sure. I believe it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just drinking my do I have it within reaching distance? There we go. I actually got this some time ago, but if you could tell, it's
Oh,
actually,
wow.
let me see if I can get more of the boat there for you. But yeah, there's the boat and the whiskey barrel there. The book actually, as this being out, my novel Pirates of Appalachia is a serial novel, my first that I'm serializing. It'll be out, and so I wanted something kind of piratey and Appalachian. So I got the little ship in the bottle, and I have a whiskey that's distillery in West Virginia called Man Cave that I put in there. So
Oh, that's
I'm
fun.
just sipping on some Appalachian whiskey, for our talk. So very
Very
good.
cool.
So you had the love of gaming and things. So I can kind of see how that progressed into the into lit RPG, lit RPG, to novels and things. Was there something? Beyond just the genre and
Mhm.
things, right? So I think there's tons of time spent on the internet and probably just everywhere how you write,
Yeah.
right? And we do open bar here, and a lot of times that's kind of the how you write. What I'm more interested in a lot of times is the why, right? I get why you wrote that one story with Mr. Rogers and things. That's
Sure.
really neat. But why do you write kind of overall? Like, what is it that gets you to sit down in your office there and get pen to paper as we used to do in the olden days?
Okay, so I'm going to give this will just be a little bit of a background too. For me, it's because I love stories and I love fiction, and I just always have since I was little. The when I was 12 years old, I was hit by a truck and in the back of the head with a mirror, and
Oh, wow.
I was in a traumatic head injury. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, near total amnesia from before that point.
Uh-huh.
And a weird thing about that particular type of amnesia is I had all of the information and none of the experiences. So
Wow.
I knew what a bus was and I knew what it was for, but I could not remember ever having seen or been on one.
Uh-huh.
And so it made it made it hard to function and live and interact with people. And uh, I think it was Moby Dick was the first book I ever found that was a fiction book. I was supposed to be in class and I found that in the library and I just sat there and read it. And it took them hours to find me. I was just sitting and reading Moby Dick because all of a sudden it came alive in my head and I was getting experiences. And I didn't have the social awkwardness of not understanding the people and not understanding what was going on around me. I could just drain in the experiences. And so I did a lot of reading and kind
Mm-hmm.
of
Sure.
rebuilt myself from the ground up from fiction, which is very helpful and gives you a really broad viewpoint and helps you understand other people, but also gives you weird, unrealistic expectations because a lot of it is very romanticized.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I can believe that. You may not want to actually try to hunt that white whale, which actually Moby Dick would have taught you anyways. That
Yeah,
maybe leave the white whale alone.
yeah,
Wow, that is something. So that was 12. So you have the information, not the experiences. Do you remember? Like, did that change your personality? Like you know what I mean? Like, are you almost like a different person from the
yeah,
time that happened? Yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
The people that I've known said absolutely. I was into video games and sports and running and activity and being outside and swimming and being in the woods and even just the switch to being very much into reading makes a
Uh-huh.
huge difference just on
Sure.
its own, because I wasn't much of a reader or anything like that. But yeah, from the people that again, I remember I've gotten back some memories and experiences, but not enough to know about really that much about my personality back then. But from the people
Sure.
that were around me and that did know, they said it makes a huge difference.
Wow. Wow. Man, I know it's ancient history at this point, but I'm sorry you
Yeah.
had to go through that. And that's amazing. Thank you for sharing the experience here. And, it's funny that it kind of makes so much sense. I mean, I think fantasy makes a lot of sense anyways. I love fantasy. I read lots of it, but the world almost became a fantasy world, right? If you have never experienced it, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I've heard of dragons, right? Like you go to the fantasy world, there's dragons there. There's, if you're in America, maybe you've never seen a castle, right? You go and there's castles there. But if you really had no experience, had no memory of experiencing them, it's almost like the whole world becomes a fantasy world to some degree.
Oh, and
Um,
I segued. I did not fully answer your question, though. That's the first half. That's the background. The answer to your
uh-huh.
question about the writing itself is I found poetry and I had a near total memory for anything I hear. Uh, Used to. I'm getting a little older now, but so I would hear poems once or twice and I'd remember them. Hear song lyrics, I'd remember them decades later. And I tried my hand at poetry and I had a good sense of rhythm. I had a good feel for poetry. And so when I started writing poetry and telling it to people, all of a sudden it flipped a switch in the people around me so that I wasn't the socially awkward kid that nobody understood and that didn't really want to be around, to looking at me with like sometimes with a sense of interest, a sense of where
Hmm.
it's like what you see with a musician or what you see with that. And so it drew a lot of attention, including in poetry, female attention, which for a young kid
Sure.
growing up 15, 16, that obviously is going to be something that draws my attention. And so people treated me very, very differently when I was creating writing instead of just reading it.
Uh-huh.
And and I love the stories. I love the books. And so, and I should clarify, I mentioned the hyper violent stories. I love the hyper violent stories. I just do the progression stories, the hyper violence. I mean,
Sure.
that's not a rip on them. They're fantastic. But I do worry about the long-term consequences if they're not counterbalanced with values.
Right. Yeah, sure, sure. I get it completely. I've said it multiple times on the show at different times, but I think a really healthy landscape for the whole industry, the artistic kind of entertainment industry, but then also for us as people is, yeah, you can have your Beavis and Butthead, you can have
Yeah,
your Breaking Bad, you can have, and then everything kind of in between, right? And it's like, yeah, sure, go have your, hyper violent like thing, but they,
yeah,
need some other stuff to kind of give it some balance and, not
yeah,
just, devolve into thinking that's the only way to be, I do
exactly.
think, I do think some studies have come out now too that have shown it, but the idea that people, if you play video games and now you go and commit, these atrocities, I think basically been disproven anyways. I think most
Yeah,
people can kind of can see that this is a video game and I'm not going to go punch everyone in the face or, grab a
yeah,
sword and go around, murdering people like they're zombies or something, right? But I get your point completely though, is you still need as a person to be able to internalize all those different things to have kind of to be well-rounded and
yeah.
stable. So awesome. Thanks for that. So where was so there's the idea, right? And actually it's really beautiful your experience with it because there's the idea that stories shape us, right? And you can
Yeah.
see it very like distinctly, though you said like, hey, I'd lost, this is how I experience the world. How do the stories you're writing now, like Mr. Rogers and the Mr. Rogers story and stuff, how have those shaped you as the act of writing? Has that shaped you in some fundamental way?
Yeah, it's as I put that character in those situations, you have to do a lot of soul searching about what would he do and how would he behave. I like to get really deep into the character viewpoint, really deep into the viewpoint of that character, and I want the actions of the character to grow out of the character and the situation, not just the situation.
Hmm.
Um, and so you got to think about that. You've got to, or not even think about it, but experience it
Sure.
as you're doing it. And so, and in my story, I get into multiple viewpoints. So I like Shakespeare is a good example. He'll have different characters come and look at things from the same thing from different viewpoints. And I
Hmm.
did the same thing. This, to some degree, this is a buddy movie. They're not buddies, at least at first, but it's the same concept in that you've got the one character I already told you about, and then you've got another character who's lived the exact opposite. He had been somewhat military trained when all this started. He had a horrific experience when it started and led him on a path of violence and revenge and stuff like that. And he's gotten very, very good at it. So you've got the kind of the more heroic but too soft of the teacher than even the classic hero trope. And then you've got the harder than an anti-hero that's on the verge of actually just being an outright villain. But yeah, it just explores the same ideas from different viewpoints. And so you've got to look at it from the different viewpoints. And if you're being fair to the consequences, I mean, one of the things I learned in writing is you can tell any message you want using any story. Like if you wanted to say you wanted to push I don't want to give an example because I don't want to get in anything that would become hyper politicized. I'm not a fan of either, and so I'm going to
That's
piss off
okay. I
both
joke
if I
that I'm
talk
a
about
radical
it.
centrist, so you're fine, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so like, say you had a young kid, a young girl that's got all these violent killers around her, and she stands up to them, and she's hyper aggressive and mouthy, and talks back to them, and is really doing things that would get her killed in the real world, and yet they all just back down.
Hmm.
You can tell any story, you can give any message you want to give,
Yeah.
but I try to be fair. I want to have the consequences of people's actions be in a universal sense true
Sure.
to how things would probably or possibly come out. I don't want to throw my own viewpoint in and argue for something. I want to give different sides.
Hmm. Sure, sure. No, I think that's underrated. The just the rule of consequences, right? Is that there's that old phrase like a story needs to be plausible to the world it created.
Yeah.
So there's kind of and so when it breaks that, right? So if it seems like we're dealing with regular, even if it's a zombie apocalypse, right? If it's supposed to be like the world we know and suddenly it's a zombie apocalypse, everyone's kind of about the same. We're still about the same human strength and things like that. And then suddenly there's someone that's 5'1" and weighs 100 pounds, getting someone that's 250 pounds and jacked into a headlock and throwing them across the room. It's just like it doesn't work that way. It really draws you out of that suspension of disbelief and things versus having
Unless
real
there's
concept.
superpowers.
Yeah, unless they're super right. That's what I mean. Is if it was this world, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you have to have that in. So okay, so now we have superpowers, and now you have lit RPG. You have okay, you saw the power level go up. So
Yeah.
maybe at first you don't win the fight, and then they power up and they're able to. So having the actual consequences lead it. I think of that all the time when I'm writing. Is there's the pantsers and plotters and whatever
Yeah.
else you want to say, but I guess I tend to be a pantser, but I just kind of go, what's the consequence of this happening? And then just write to that and then kind of go forward. And your story, your plot evolves based on those consequences. And it's very natural and kind of gets you where you're going. So I think that's a lovely way to do it. So I like to ask this question now. So actually, since fantasy author Ken Liu, happen to know he wrote the Dandelion Dynasty, the Glass Menagerie.
I've
No,
heard of
that
the
might
Glass
not be right.
Menagerie, but I haven't read any of them.
And so he was on the show. So actually Dario put me in contact with him too. So the whole show is 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Oh, fun.
It's almost all like referrals, which I love about it. But so he put me in contact with Ken, and Ken, as we were talking, and he was like, "Wait." And I always joke that like with a name called Writers Drinking Whiskey, I'm ethically mandated to talk some writing.
Yeah.
And as I said that to him, he was like, "Wait, let me turn this around on you. What are you great at?" And he's like, I don't think writers talk enough about what they're great at. And he said it, and I was like, oh, I think that's like, I actually think that's a lovely question. And so I didn't steal it because he said it on my show, but I now use it all the time. And I try to give him credit for it like I just did. But so in that vein, what are you great at?
I'm pretty much the opposite of the average writer because I've seen from almost every writer that I've known, they're really natural at the descriptive and the uh, longer descriptions and longer winded type stuff, and they cut it back, and they have to develop the skill of cutting it back, and they're really good at those kind of elements, and a lot of them struggle with natural dialogue and things like that, action scenes and things like that. Whereas I spent my life playing tabletop role playing games where I wasn't, in a lot of cases, dungeon mastering. I wasn't running the games most of the time. I was playing the game. So I'm telling what the character says. I'm saying what the character does. That's years or decades, I guess, of doing that since I was 7. Uh,
Hmm.
and then I did some acting and I did improv acting. And so all of that, and I watch a lot of TV and a lot of shows. I don't just read. So a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the action that comes really naturally to me, but I have to force myself to include the setting at all because that's what the DM used to do.
Sure. Right.
And that's one of the things that's nice about working in that universe is I get more experience building the setting and stuff, but I didn't have to do as much of the
Right.
planning and the heavy lifting, although I do like making my own universes and stuff, but I didn't have to do as much of that. And it made it easier for him to work with me because I'm used to having a dungeon master who says, no, you can't do that, or yes, you can do that. So when I write something and he's like, well, that doesn't quite work because of this and this, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just do this and this instead because I'm used to doing that when you can't do what you want in
Uh-huh.
role-playing games.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really funny. It was funny. We were just talking. We had mentioned, I forget if it was pre-show, but I'll mention it now. It was Dario Cherriello who had put
Yeah.
us in contact here. I mean, I always like to link everyone up. So future me, remember to put Dario's episode up there.
Hi, Dario.
And yeah, he was on. They pirated the show for my book coming out. So Dario and Linda. Why did I just blank? No, not Linda. Diane Hammond and Sue O'Connor, who have all been on the show, multiple times, had popped on and interviewed me for it, and we got into talking about acting because they used to do a bunch of acting too, and it was Dario saying it's like, it's almost like all writers need to be method actors. It's like you just have to like I'm in this character and like just
Yeah.
method act it through. So I can see that. And then with an actor, yeah, you don't have to worry about the staging. You don't have to worry about here's someone's doing the set design and whatever it might be. So I can see how much easier that would be. But yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. So as you've worked through it, what's the greatest challenge you've faced? Kind of, is it, I guess it could be any book, anywhere. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be writing related. If there's a greater other challenge you want to talk about, that's fine too.
For writing for this particular book, I was writing the book and I had gotten the okay for it and gotten the okay to do it, made the deal. And then we had some health issues that came up and other problems, and it made it where I'm having to work 65 hours at my main job just to
Oh, geez.
make things work. And I've got the book deal, my dream all set up that I've actually got it okayed. He's going to publish a book. I just have to write it. And book ends up being 700 pages. So it's quite a challenge to get that done in the time scale I was trying to do. But I just determined I'm just going to do it no matter what. And so there's like half of it I don't even remember. It would be get home from
Sure,
work,
it's a fever dream.
sit down at the computer, and you end up with a lot of screenfuls of E's that you have to go back and fix later. But that was challenging, but it worked. So I was able to
Right.
go back and clean it up afterwards.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the beauty of editing, right? Is
Yeah,
not the improv actor where you're stuck with with whatever you just did. So,
right.
yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Like, I used to this year. I've been writing and podcasting full time for the first time, but I used to always just I was working. Right. When I left, I was a director for a quality regulatory department, did medical devices and things. Right. And that was actually the hardest one. Before I had kind of gone up the rungs, what I was always able to do was just get really good at my job. and
Yeah.
really efficient at it. And then that would always give me time to work on my writing. So other people would be at the water cooler or whatever, you know. And I'm friendly enough, so I would talk to people, but usually in the course of the job. So when it was
Yeah.
like very busy, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're so dedicated," and I was. I always got my job done, and like did well. But then I always did it like super well. So then I would always be ahead of the game, everything. So I always could make time.
Nice.
You know, now I can fit in an hour or two to write and things.
Hmm.
So that juggling, it's funny. I think it's probably like a blessing and a curse, right? Like yeah, you wish you could just, let, all your great writers and artists and all of them out there, they can just do their craft and make a great living out of it. Um, but it also, like, and so maybe it subtracts to some degree when you have to have a full-time job, or, John Gilstrap on the show always calls it his big boy day job, and so maybe it does subtract to some degree, but then it also like forces, it's only if you love it, right? Like if you
Right.
don't actually love it, you're not going to, keep writing all the time. You're not going to go through what you did if
Right.
that wasn't your dream and this wasn't something you were so passionate about. So it does weed out a lot of people that aren't going to be so passionate about it, or aren't
Right.
going to, I always say bleed for it, but it was maybe a morbid way to say it. But so I think that's definitely a challenge, but I'm glad you got through it and you got those E's edited.
Clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack. Ding. Oh, hello. You caught me right as I was putting the finishing touches on my epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia. And now it is time for the long road to publication and the long editing process. As writers, we spend tons of time editing our work. The hardest part, I think, of the editing process is really like the proofreading, the copy editing, because you were so immersed in it. I've just spent 13 years immersed in Pirates, got it all together, went through, edited it front and back by characters, all these different asymmetrical ways. And still, it's going to have typos in it. And they're going to horrify me one day if I ever find those in the actual printed edition. The way I combat that is with Edit GPT. You found today's sponsor. The link is on the screen now. I'm going to put it here. Here's the link. If you're on the podcast forum and you can't see me pointing up at that link, if you're on a podcast, you're really missing out. I'm really animated with my hands. But if you can't find it on there, feel free. You'll find it in the description. It helps support the show, helps restock the bar, helps keep this guy happy so that we can keep putting all these shows out there for all of you. Thanks for everything. Let's get back to the writing, because Pirates of Appalachia is not going to finish itself. The one thing Edit GPT cannot do is save the file for you. So I'm going to make sure to save that now. So I want to get back to my work. You get back to your regularly scheduled programming.
How do you, so when you do that, so when you get to the editing process, what does that entail for you? Everyone talks about kind of the first part writing process, but how do you go through editing it? Do you have an editor that comes through and helps you? Do you use any of the AI ones now? Like there's like Edit GPT and all of these other ones that are actually getting pretty great at the grammar part of it. But how does that process for you?
Okay. My process for book 2 is very different than my process for book 1. Partly because those tools didn't exist as much in book 1, or at least I didn't know about them.
Sure.
Uh, So when I would do book 1, I would go through and I would write the scene and I'd write the chapters, chapter 2, and then I'd go through and I'd add the setting because,
Sure.
and it's hard then to weave it in to make sure it, and then you're going through then a third draft to make sure that the setting and the actions actually matter together. So that it's not like just as an afterthought, and there'd be little things as I needed different elements, I'd put them in, but I didn't use anywhere near enough settings, so I'd have to go back and add more. I've learned now since that it works better, and I guess this was near the end. I learned that it works better if I plan the setting first, and then I put the characters there, than if I do it the other way. It's just a little easier it saves me a draft of having to go back and making sure it actually matters. But so that would be the first thing that I do, is go through, add in settings, add in those kind of things, more sensory data, less about in your head or things like that. And then
Sure.
in this case, my wife helped me really a lot. She's great at setting stuff in details. She helped me a lot with that early in book 1. And then I had her go over it so many times that she just got burned out and just like, and then I have a friend who passed recently who was just brilliant at grammar. She used to be the dean of nursing at Yale, so she
Hmm.
just fantastically brilliant. And she would go over some of like the technical stuff, and I would have to be careful not to let her over technical my voice, but
Sure. Right.
she was also usually pretty good at that. And then working with a co-author is nice because Dow created the universe. In this case, it's my book, it's his universe, but then he goes through because his name is going to be on it. He goes through and he's like, this part needs a little bit more setting detail. This, yeah, the biggest thing with Dow with me is this isn't a Marvel movie. You can't have them talk that much. The dialogue is great, but you can't do that in a fight.
They can't be as quippy as they are in
Yeah.
Marvel. Yeah.
That was the biggest thing that I would run into with that. But it also really helps having more experience. I just as a weird aside, and I'm sorry to get off, but I think the way we teach writing is entirely wrong. I think the best way to do writing or to teach writing is to have a person working with a particular mentor, and you write the thing and then they help you, give you feedback, and then you write it again and then they help you and they give you feedback, and then you do that one until it's right, and then you go on and you do another, and you can do it whenever you see, and I've read all kinds of books on it, I've worked with all kinds of mentors, and they're great, but even when you're working with a class or even when you're working with a person, it's always you're either getting bad information from people that don't know anything that are helping as beta readers in the early stages. I know there are people that have had great beta readers. There's people that have had great, I have not had great experiences with that until after I was already a writer and published, or about to be. And then I've had some great ones. But when you're in classes, there are a bunch of students that are all trying to learn at the same time, so they don't know.
Right.
And the teacher will give you feedback once on the story, and then you hopefully fixed it. But how do you know? Because you're not the one who already knows. So I just feel like there's that step missing. And I've been lucky. I had two great instructors, William Bernhardt of the Red Sneaker Writers. Anybody who's wanting to be an author that's watching this, he's the best first source that I've found. Little books, easy, great sources. And then before he passed, I was really lucky enough to finish taking every class offered by David Farland online, who is amazing. He was Brandon Sanderson's writing mentor and Stephanie Meyer. So just a fantastic, fantastic teacher. But and I've lost the main thread. What was the main question?
Well, you were talking about how we teach writing wrong. It was we went on our aside about how to teach it correctly, but which is fine. I actually think that's really interesting because I think so much of like beta readers things like bad feedback generally, not just that it's only bad feedback's not like just the sort of preview of a purview of like beta readers, right? Like anyone can give you like bad feedback, but I think one of the most common bad feedback is they don't understand the world you're writing in, right? Or what you're trying to achieve, like what's happening. So I can see that with it being Dow's world. So when he's giving you feedback, he actually understands like this is what the world is, here's kind of the rules of it, here's the tonally and things, even if you change tone a little like with the Mr. Rogers stories and things, but it's still like the Marvel quips kind of feedback or just Marvel chattiness feedback. So I can see that completely, because then it's hard if you have a story and you want to write the surreal satire, and you write a surreal satire, and then people go, well, I just don't get it. What's happening with this, right? And that could be good feedback because maybe you weren't clear enough.
Right.
Or that just is maybe not the right audience, or it's just that it's not what they would have wrote, and you get so much of this is how I would have wrote it, or, feedback to it. So having an actual mentor with you that can go through, and then even when you're writing your own world, you can say, this is what I'm going for. And they can look at it from that lens and go, okay, well, you know what, though, here's, this kind of is not making sense, or this is, and even like the voice, so much, I say there's kind of a gentrification of writing to some degree. So everyone kind of went to house style.
Yeah.
And it's so you can pick up one book from, if you go to Barnes and Noble and go to the best-selling books, or the, not even like best-selling, just the new ones out.
Yeah.
You could literally, if you took the covers off and picked one up, pick the next one up, you can hardly tell who's writing what, you know. And I don't think that's great. I think that's kind of, it's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Just like I don't think there's anything wrong with Beavis and Butthead. But it's also, do you want everything to be the same? Here's this just same style all of the time, you know? And yeah, so voice is super important. So making sure you don't lose that in the editing process or development process is important to kind of have some artistry about it. I don't think house style, I don't think there's any artistry to it anymore. It's just you painted the wall beige, and people want beige walls. I have beige walls here. I think technically it's Swiss mocha, I think, is our wall color or something like that. But it's like some form of beige that we feel better about because it's Swiss or something. But yeah, no, thank you for taking us there. I think it's a good conversation about how we teach writing. So
Editing.
Yes.
One thing that was really nice with this particular book, because Dow is a co-author on it, there was one chapter. He's great at feedback. He'll be like, boom, 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 boom. He likes to say, I'm Chinese. So he's not as great at positive feedback. He's great at negative feedback. Like, I found out that he liked my story, particularly after it had been purchased and published, and he was doing a making of story where he's like talking all kinds of positive things about it that he'd never told me. But there's one chapter, you know, what's nice about working with somebody that's good at that kind of thing, and as a professional author, he's like, this chapter is crap, or this chapter doesn't work at all, and don't say why, and I'll fix it and stuff. But there was one that I just went over it and over it and over it, and I'm like, whatever this skill is that I need, I don't have, and I'm not getting. And I'm like, can you just fix it? And he went through and a few paragraphs here, a few paragraphs there, and he was able to just fix it and make it sing. And then I was able to read it and go, oh, that's how. And then I could do it too.
Sure.
So that's really helpful. But the new AI stuff is fantastic. You have to tell it, stop rewriting my stuff.
Right.
Not only that, which is especially frustrating when there's very limited ways that you can say something and they get a really great one that you might have come up with on your own. And you're like, no, I can't use that. Shut up. Don't do that. But
right.
And they like to add M dashes into everything just constantly and consistently. I don't know why, but it's great for editing. It's great for polish. It's getting better and better at giving general feedback too for stories and stuff, although you have to watch it. But yeah, no, for editing, it's going to be just a fantastic tool if you know what you're doing with it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I heard someone talking about AI just generally, and he was saying, you have to stop thinking of it like a tool and start thinking of it like a team member. And so you got to tell your team member what you expect from them. Oh, what's this? And so, because, I think the grammar part's awesome. I'm just, it's like the first book I ever wrote, or the first book I ever published, was called The Hordes of Torment. It's now called But the Ripping Apart. It was
called what?
Torturous, But the Ripping Apart. It's a torturous publication story, but the first publication, the publisher sent me the advanced review copy. And the very first paragraph, there's a quotation mark facing the wrong way. And I'm just like horrified by it, right? I'm like, how did I couldn't have missed that? What's happening, And this is my first book, so I didn't realize, it was supposed to change before it actually got out to the population. And I go look at all my files, and I edited this thing like 1,000 times, right? And it was there the whole time. I just never noticed it, because I read it right. I read it here instead of here, whichever way it went. And so that's how I ended up meeting Dario, actually, when I got my rights back to that book after kind of the disaster publication history. And I was like, I just want to edit this thing. I just want it to be as good of a story as it can be. I'm going to publish it myself. Just let it be out there, And so I know it's complete self. And, so over the years, but like the edit GPT things, I don't even have them give me writing suggestions. but the finding, misplaced quotation marks basically every single time.
Yeah.
But the writing, yeah, it's all em dashes. They love adjectives and adverbs. Like every sentence needs to have like 17 like descriptors in there and things. But I'm sure it'll come along. But if you think of it like that, like, oh, okay, this is just to give me some feedback. Okay, that's not good. But okay, maybe this little part, I think it can be pretty valuable to the editing process, I think. But awesome, thanks for that. So I have a special section of the show I like to call shots. So rapid fire questions here. You can take a sip each one if you want or not. It's completely up to you. Very, very good. Awesome. So are you ready?
Sure. I'm going to take a sip on that. That was a question.
Very good. So, as someone who writes, LitRPG has the conventions of video games, which are, video games being a modern invention. I thought I'd ask you about ancient games.
Sure.
So, everyone, we're starting. I start all the shots now with, and I'm going to have a leaderboard for this eventually here in the next few weeks. It's trivia. I'm going to award points by whatever kind of strikes my fancy. We'll go for there. So, what is the oldest known game humankind played? You can even just give me a region, whatever you want. Etch. So
I'm
the
gonna
oldest
say catch.
catch. Oh, that's funny. Maybe the oldest one we know of is a game called Senet, and this is all according to like the Google box.
Yeah.
Senet, which was an ancient Egyptian board game from about 3100 BC. And it was a pastime and a spiritual tool. It's supposed to help you on your like journey to the afterlife. The
that's cool.
All about their journey over. So they had games to facilitate. What was
Well,
at
the rock's
stake?
hard enough. That'll help you on your way to the afterlife too.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. What was at stake? So there's an ancient Mayan ball game called Poke to Poke. And so basically the players hit this rubber ball through stone hoops, which is kind of funny. It's like stone hoops is rubber ball. It's very basketball-like still to this day. So, but they could only use their hips, knees, and elbows and go. So what was at stake for the players of this game?
Probably women.
That's a good guess, but in this case, the winning or the losing, but even sometimes the winning were sacrificed to the gods because there was special religious significance. So
women or death. I should have gone with death.
Yeah, it's a universal mankind activity. So this ancient Chinese strategy game is still considered one of the most complex board games ever created.
Mahjong?
Nope, it's close. It's called Go.
I've heard of the Go. I've heard of Go.
Yeah, it's QI. I forget. I should ask my wife. It was actually
very good.
I should have mentioned it when you said it. When you said that your dad was like, "I'm Chinese. I can only give negative feedback." So my wife is Chinese, and so she will do that too. I didn't realize she liked me until she was proposing marriage to me, and I was like, "What are we talking about?" I thought you didn't like me. But yeah, so that one dates back all the way to 2300, BC. And it says, so it's possible game positions that they're, so it says this, I don't know how true this is, but it tells me that there's more possible game positions than there are atoms in the universe. So if maybe that's true, maybe it's not. If it's true, it's pretty interesting. And then the last one for our question section here is, which ancient game was used to teach military strategy to young nobles in medieval Japan?
I have no idea, and I'm getting no points. I lose.
Everyone gets random points that I just created based on this. It's Soji. It's a Japanese chess. So I might be saying that right. It looks like Soji, Shogi. So
Hey, 1 point per drink.
Chess. Yeah. And then I'll give you a bonus question here. What is the first video game I ever played?
Pong.
Pong? I think that is it. I think Pong was the first game I played. Yeah. So you nailed that one. So moving on from the trivia, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I really like the last Rocky movie, the one that wasn't numbered. The speech he gave his son is just fantastic advice in just every aspect of life. And almost every book series in like action adventure or fantasy or science fiction or thriller, almost every series has this message as not only the background of the main character's journey, but as a structural element of it. And that is the life will knock you down and it'll beat you down and you just have to get back up. Life will beat you down, but you just have to keep getting back up. You just get back up and you just keep fighting. That's how winning is done, is what he says in the traditional Rocky. That's how winning is done, But
Yeah.
I think if you look for it, that message is in movies, shows again and again and again. And I think it is one of the core reasons that stories have been valuable to humanity is that you just keep getting back up, and that's how you win. You just keep struggling, you keep fighting, you learn how to do it better each time. And each act, your character is trying to solve the problem, but they're trying different, more complicated ways. And just when you think you're going to lose, that's when you really find the inner strength and you find a way to overcome it and win. And that might be a lie a lot of the time, but it's an incredibly useful lie for survival of the species and for the survival of humanity or success in your own life. So I think that's one of the best pieces of advice that you get a lot of different ways from all these things.
Sure. There is such a thing as a useful delusion, right? Like it can be useful to have some delusion, like, oh, of course I'm going to do that thing, and that thing might be really hard, and you may never do it, but you needs to start almost with that irrational kind of belief that you can do something or you can achieve something. So very cool. Thanks for that. What was the worst piece of advice you ever received?
Don't try to pursue the arts because it's not practical. That's worded all kinds of different ways, and from well-meaning, helpful to incredibly brutal harshness. But everyone who's ever succeeded at anything important has ignored that advice. It's the most common advice given to anybody by people who want to keep everybody else down.
Right, sure. It's funny. We went and saw this string quartet. I don't know. It was a couple of months back now at this point, but one of the people that went with us went, I wish I'd stayed with the clarinet, in high school, but my mom wouldn't let me or something. And I was like, the truth is the people that still do that, the people that still write, it's not that much of a choice. It doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like something you have to do. So it's like, I'll work 65 hours and still do this thing. That's what I have to do. They felt that need, lots of people, it might be fun, it might be interesting, but you don't have that, I have to do this. So it sounds like great advice. Yeah, sounds like a great practical advice to, get a job as an engineer. But, if you're so compelled that maybe you can do, and realistically you may need to do both for some period, but if you think that's the great thing and that's the only reason you don't write or you don't play clarinet, it's usually not. It's just usually like it's a hard road and you didn't want to. I mean, that's fine. I'm not begrudging anyone that doesn't want to like do these crazy things, but it makes a lot of sense. But so have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable?
Have I ever witnessed anything inexplicable? Yeah, lots of things. I'll start with the fact that when I was hit by the truck, they said he's going to die. And then it was, okay, well, he's tougher than we thought. He's going to pull through. He's going to be brain dead, but he's not going to die. And then it was, it just was one thing after another, constant. And they should have been right because of the severity of the damage. But my brain, the brain tissue, the damaged tissue healed in ways that it's not supposed to, in remarkable ways. And not talking anything particular, I don't want to get into religion and stuff, but there's definitely things about faith and prayer that we don't understand. And I had large communities. We happened to live in a Mennonite community at the time that we were not Mennonite. We just lived in an area, and we had that whole group of people praying for us and then praying for me. And then there's a group down in Illinois. My family was heavily involved there with the Salvation Army, though again, I wasn't, but praying for it. And if you have such large groups of people praying and then you have a miraculous healing, it's something that you can look at God, you can look, and I believe in God, though I don't believe in what I like to call, probably somewhat disrespectfully, probably shouldn't, I don't believe in any particular brand name of God, but
Sure.
there does seem to be power in faith and power in belief in large groups of people. And so
Hmm.
that is inexplicable. And I did have one of the cool experiences where you see yourself from outside and then get pulled back in. So that was kind of cool.
Uh-huh. Oh wow, yeah, that is cool. You didn't have a near-death experience? Have you heard of those, right? Where like someone like basically dies, like essentially dies, and then they have memories that they shouldn't have, and that's usually like they saw the light or things like that. Did anything like that happen? Or I mean, maybe you wouldn't remember anyways, but
Yeah, the only ones I got was the floating above myself there at the hospital when I was hit, floating looking down. So that was
okay.
the version that I got. So
Right, right, sure. Yeah, yeah, that's always interesting. Thanks for that. It's so funny you say it too, because I think there has been studies that show like prayer actually works, where they just went, here's people that aren't being prayed for versus people that prayed for, and then what would you expect the outcomes to be? And then the ones people that were prayed for. So
well, look at the
I'm with
placebo
you.
effect.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Well, yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Even with placebo effect, even with things they've measured, there's a
Yeah.
really a problem with recreating anything now. They go back and try to do it, and they're like, oh, so I don't know. I always think the world and universe is somewhat like bigger and more magical and wonderful than we have any idea of, and we like to think we can measure and prod everything,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're all we do. It's like that old metaphor. There's the ocean of your ignorance, where this little island, and then as you learn more, you just have more coastline that know, like, so
Yeah.
you actually are more aware of what you don't know, and like, and things. So awesome. So moving on, what's the strangest, potentially self-incriminating thing you've Googled this week?
I'm not thinking of one that's entertaining that's from this week, but uh, I did uh, Google what would happen to a body you if something if you were to rip it limb from limb, actually rip it limb from limb, what would that actually be like? And what would the details of it and what kind of force would it take to do it and how would you do it? So that's pretty questionably incriminating.
Right, sure, sure. It's so funny. I think if you're a writer and someone in your vicinity comes up missing, if they do one of those internet searches like they do crew crime, like you're in trouble. I was
Oh
looking up
yeah.
at one point ghost guns. I was writing some of the ghost guns and I didn't know much about them. I was like doing all of this research because it's going to play kind of an integral part. And so I was like, I don't need to know all of it, but I need to know
Yeah.
enough to follow this through. And I'm like, man, if someone ever looks at this, they're going to think I'm just producing guns like like in mass, like every which kind. So,
Somebody could get away with murder by hacking a writer, find out what they were researching, and then do that near them
that's true. I think they
and leave
could.
evidence by them.
Right, right. We'll have to edit that out of the show because we
Yeah,
might have just screwed ourselves for that. Awesome. Do you think in words?
I do. I think in words, concepts, songs, things like that. But I do think in words. I'm not one of the people that doesn't get words.
Uh-huh. Okay,
And I can
very
read
good.
in my dreams despite what they say.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever had. Do you ever lucid dream?
Oh yeah. Back when I was really young, I would get nightmares, and my brother had a trick that he used that if you close your eyes 3 times, it'll wake you up. And I would do that for a while, and that got me then experimenting with different things. And so I would like wake up, but I'd be in the dream. And you can
Hmm.
like if you try to force things too much, it'll wake you up. But
Right.
I've been able to experiment with different things. Like I'll try to like walk through walls. And the funny and frustrating thing is sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. It's like solid. I'm like, how is this
Hmm.
solid? This is a dream. But it,
Right.
yeah, I like lucid dreams. I can't ever do it on purpose, but it does happen sometimes, and I like it a lot.
Right, right, very good. And then, so gaming question here: Mario versus Sonic. Who you got?
Which is cooler? Who would win in a fight?
Who would win in a fight?
There is no question Mario is going to get destroyed unless he happens to be invincible, and even then, he can't really do anything to Sonic.
Sure,
I
he
played a
led.
lot more Mario. I like Mario. He's got cool powers, but Sonic is so fast. There's just no chance.
Very good. Awesome. And then, I always use an AI question now. This was actually, I think, one of the better ones. Usually I put in like, I'm interviewing this person, give me a question for the
Oh,
show.
fun.
And a lot of them end up being kind of bad, but this one I think was fun. So, if you could be trapped in any one of your game worlds for a week with all your powers intact, what's the first thing you'd do? So you can pick whatever game world you want, and then what's the first thing you would do there?
Okay, so I can be in any game world at all. I think I would dig out one of the old superhero games and like fly and teleport and fight
Uh-huh.
villains and I would do superhero stuff. If Now, if I was going to stay in the world, that would be a very different answer. But if you're just going to be there short term, that's the kind of thing that I would do.
Right, right, very good. Yeah, it's at a week. That's what the AI overlords decided to add in there. So I always think that to myself, but like, if you had a superpower, what would it be? And I'm like, I know it sounds lazy and boring, but just flying would be so cool. Like, and I had this weird brief obsession with hawks, and raptors, I guess, really more
Hmm.
generally. And I still love them. I still look out for them. But I used to go like hunt them just to like look and take pictures. But all the time, and then my family at one point I pulled off the side of the freeway because there was a golden eagle by the
I love
Ontario
those.
airport down the road, and I'm like, I have to look at this golden eagle. Like, what's it doing here? And they're like, what are you doing? We're on the side of the road. I'm like, you guys should come out and look at the eagle. It's far enough away that it doesn't feel like stressed by us, but close enough you can see it really, and like especially with the camera, like see complete detail. I'm like, should come look at it. They're like, we're not going to look at the eagle, but I'm like, man, just that ability to just like fly or like teleport, do those things, like just the
Yeah.
how magical it would actually be to like do some of those things would be pretty cool. So, and finally, our last question for our shots portion here: favorite podcast and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
Well, Writers Drinking Whiskey is one I found out very recently. So I am enjoying being on it, and I did enjoy watching the ones that I have so far. So I haven't seen this episode yet. So let's see. Uh, so my favorite podcast is currently, it's horrible, but it's Reddit stories. It's where they go through the Reddit stories and they read them and they discuss them and stuff like that. And it is the stories are extreme, but it really distracts. I listen to books, podcasts, and audiobooks and stuff at work, great courses, things like that. But right now, that one distracts me from work better than almost anything else. And the reason that that is Writers Drinking Whiskey is because you told me it had to be.
Very true. Very true. It's funny. Sometimes I ask as one of those questions like, "What's your guilty pleasure?" And
Yeah.
I get it. Like, sometimes you need that thing. That's why I always say like Beavis and Butthead's a nice fill in for it. But I'm like, sometimes you just need something that's a little like just not serious, like interesting enough to kind of get your attention, but not serious enough that like you like care about it,
Yeah.
And so one of my guilty pleasures that I do is a lot of the YouTube videos where they bag on Star Wars or things like that because I loved Star Wars and things. And then like now I just don't even watch it anymore. It's just got, I have no idea what happened to it, but they try to break it down and maybe they're right or not. But it's a little bit of catharsis, but it does nothing for me. But because I don't care about it enough, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, here's a thing to divert me while I'm washing dishes or
Yeah.
whatever it is I might be doing. So awesome. So I forgot to ask beforehand. It wasn't on my list. I need to add it back on there. I have a little template I use for the shows to kind of keep me a little bit on track here because I have the attention span of a fruit fly. But did you have something you could read for us today?
Sure.
Awesome.
I was going to read part of my book just because it was,
Yeah.
but I thought these are dark and serious times, so it's probably good to read something a little bit more serious, a little bit more heartfelt and moving.
Okay.
So this is called The Great Divide. This is a poem. My underwear is riding up, and I, by social custom, can do nothing. So while the people around me smile in ignorance, I smile in despair. My underwear is riding up, and I wonder if it's true I can do nothing. For a long moment, I teeter on the brink of a decision, and my mind is divided, in perfect analogy, with my cheeks. To me, At this moment, this dilemma is about more than comfort. It has become a drama worthy of Shakespeare himself and a tragedy that would give even Hamlet pause. To tug or not to tug? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler for the hind to suffer the stings and narrows of uprising undies, or to pull down against a rectal reaving and taboo customs, rend them. I am nearly inspired. But I find that ingrained behavior is just that, and my underwear is now its hostage. I adjust my belt and twist in mid-step with devious intent, attempting to free the hostage without paying the ransom. But all my not-so-subtle efforts fail and backfire. Like a desperate man who has fallen into quicksand, the more I struggle, the more I sink. The more I sink, the more they rise, up and up and up. And I wish somebody would offer me with a tree branch, or at least with social grace, they'd turn around. But they all continue with their pointless partying, oblivious or uncaring to my plight. It's only after my neck is sunk beneath the quicksand, necessity being the mother and all that I find a vine to save me from my rising descent. I beg excuse and retreat to the bathroom. Release there has never been more sweet.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I always mute my mic when people are reading so that then everyone can hear it. But my laughter's not interrupting. But yeah, that's a great one. And we did need that for these dark times.
My wife was a bad influence. I had this impulse to read that, and I made a snide comment. I was not going to do it. And she's like, "You have to." And I'm like, "You're a bad influence. You're supposed to tell me not to."
There you go. There you go. Thank you to your wife for that. That was a really fun one. And thank you so much for coming on. So if folks want to learn more about you or find your work, what's the best place to point them to?
I'm on Facebook. I have Jason J. Willis, Amazon, and you can find me through just Jason J. Willis or Head of the Class book. You can find it and it'll link you to everything else. www.starlightpublishing.com. I don't have like a separate website other than Facebook, and I have a Facebook author page, but just Google Jason J. Willis author. I'm sure you'd find it on there too.
And then, so I like to say it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. And what I've taken to asking here this season is so we talked AI a little bit, but then I think it's a really fascinating time to be a writer. Because there's, all of these serial novels coming back and things. I wrote a book not really planning to serialize it, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's actually kind of exactly, where this should go. And then there's, proliferation of indie, authors and publishers taking new, creative ways to do it, as the old models kind of breaking. So it's fascinating and terrifying and difficult all at once. But what do you think the future is for storytelling? What the future is for books? Like what do you think is next?
Writers are going to hate this answer and readers are going to love it. I just want to warn you in advance. This is not necessarily, I want to be clear. Writers, don't kill me. This is not what I think should happen. The man asked me what I think will happen. And what I think is going to happen is that everything is going to be written at first by individuals, then probably by teams or individuals and AI and teams, where every time that there's anything that's big and successful, at least, it's going to be you write the main thing, and then you write the PG version of it, and then you write the R-rated version of it, and then you write the hyper-violent version of it, and then you write the horror version of it, and then you write the romance version of it, and then you write the more extreme romance version of it, then you write the romantasy version of it, then you write the this and that and things like that. And then the reader or the watcher for movies and stuff will be able to watch the main one and then go, I like that, but I want it with a happy ending. And writers hate the idea of that. I don't as much, just because I happen to grow up with the Marvel multiverse stories in comics being one of my defining early things. So what ifs and alternate things and stuff, it's just all part of the thing for me. But I get you make a piece of art, you want to communicate a particular thing. You don't want to go, And what if this was a horror movie, or what if it was a romance, or what if this character was it with this guy? And instead of having to be, I'm Team Jacob and you're Team Edward, you can get whichever you want, and you can even randomize it and get different versions of it. And that just seems to be the direction that we're heading, is customizable. And odds are, when I first started thinking of it, was years and years ago when I thought this was the direction it was going to head. I thought it was going to be that. And now I think it's going to be, you can get the main one free, but you have to pay for any variation. It's going to be the pay to play garbage.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's going to be
will come in,
the add-on for this, add-on for that, add-on for this. But it'll be changing the angles. It'll be, I want this story, but I want it with nudity in this scene. I want it with this rated or that rated, much more extreme rated. I just think that's the future of storytelling, no matter whether we like it or not. And I think more than half of it's going to be written by AI.
Sure. Well, as you were saying that, I was like, I could see, I write Pirates of Appalachia, and then the people reading it go, oh, I really love this, but he is really vulgar. I want to dial down the vulgarness of it, and I'm not going to go, the person trying to write all those versions, that's, 10 years out of your life, right? Trying to kind of write all those, but AI can do that in, however many seconds, right? So it's like, okay, you get it, it goes into your AI, feedback, and then you can make those little alterations. Like, no, I don't want nudity. Yes, I want nudity. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. So thanks so much for that, and thanks again, so much for coming on. It was a real blast getting a chance to talk with you and have a drink here. So cheers to you.
Hey, you never told us what you're having. Yeah, you told me, but you didn't tell them.
I didn't. I have my. So.
Oh yeah, you did the boat. Yeah. Okay.
You did the boat. Yeah. So. Yeah, so I had my customary whiskey to keep me warm. It's California. We're known for how cold it is here, so I have to warm myself up with the whiskey on a daily basis. So
I am in Minnesota. If I didn't have a strong sense of sarcasm, I'd be very angry with you for saying California.
It's okay.
I'm in northern Minnesota. Many, if not most people in Canada, because most of the people are really low down in Canada, are actually further south than I am.
Oh, I believe it. It's funny. I was about to say you're practically in Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can believe it because we were in Vancouver right after Christmas. And so, it was literally like December, I don't know, 28th, something like that when we were there. And weather was, it's a little colder than it was here, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm in Canada, there's snow everywhere, it's so cold. It was, we had gone to Seattle first and the weather wasn't much different. I was like, yeah.
And my whiskey and my publisher are Canadian.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Though I'm Irish, so I should be drinking Irish whiskey. I'm a traitor.
I drink all of them. I love Irish whiskeys too, but I drink a lot of those lately. But I drink all of them. I don't think there's any reason to be a traitor. Just, it's a global economy of whiskeys. You just enjoy all of them. Thanks as always for tuning in. It was a great time. And don't forget to head over to Substack so we can have a drink and read Pirates of Appalachia together. We're at chapter 8. Hold it as long as you can, where we're actually checking in on the world of the Zeodarm that are being bombed from the Drone Strike arcade and seeing the chaos it's having on this fully fleshed out fantasy world. That's just one of the many streams in here. But as candidate Michael Hawk and the other droners, the other esports stars go in and compete for high scores, there's actually a real world that's being affected. And the Zeodarm are dealing with it, and you get your first check-in with them and what's happening there and how they see the drones as these silver war gods that they now have to defeat. So we're getting into really some of the meat of the story, some of the tribalism aspects in an extremely real, actual tribe sense. And it's a really fun. I really love the storyline. It was one that came to me last. I wrote almost the entire book, thinking you're a complete madman. Why do you keep writing this part? It doesn't make sense. And then once I was getting close to being done, I realized, no, this absolutely makes sense. It's really the heart of the story. If it doesn't have this, it's really missing something. So, and because I'm serializing it and I don't have to fit it into some, book length form, exactly it's there for you. I get to go through with this passion project. So I hope you'll check it out. Let me know what you think. If not, you can stay here. We'll drink together on Writers Drinking Whiskey with other people that are viewing on YouTube. It's always a great time. Thanks so much for all that you do and for all of your support. Cheers, everybody.